Welcome to the Lead with Levity podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Heather Walker, and I am looking forward to this next episode because guess what? Life can be kind of stressful. And I don't know if it's stressful for you, but I know that I've been having lots of conversations with different clients, with friends, with family members, with members of my community when I go to my kids' school. And the common thread is I'm overwhelmed, I'm tired, I'm fried, I'm waiting for Saturday to arrive. And guess what? It's only Tuesday. What am I going to do? I don't know if I'm going to make it. And if that is you, I want to encourage you today. This episode is for you. In this episode, we are going to address the overwhelm. We're going to talk about energy. We're going to talk about some things that you can do to manage your energy and mindsets, really, some ways that you can think about how you're showing up and how you're navigating all of the things that are coming at you so that you can evaluate if you want to make some changes. I know that sounded really cryptic. Don't worry, the episode won't be cryptic at all. Our guest is Pam Marcheski. Pam is a coach on MPeak Performance. She's an MPeak Performance coach, and she has worked with Fortune 500 companies. In fact, she has been a senior executive at multiple Fortune 500 companies, so she understands what it's like to have your schedule packed full of meetings, back to back, double booked, traveling added in there. She gets it. She gets all of that. And she brings such a calm presence to this conversation. So I can't wait to share this with you. I'm looking forward to it. She drops several jewels and lots of just wisdom and guidance and things to think about. I hope you get a lot of value from this conversation.
It's time for a sneak peek. Sneak peek, sneak peek.
Presence is really awareness of where you're at, both in mind and body. So we can be present physically, but are we really present? And that's really important. If we start to pay attention to the things that are getting our attention and build a strategy around that, maybe that idea about time, that emotion around time kind of comes down a little bit.
Welcome back to the Lead with Levity podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Heather Walker, and I am very excited to introduce our next guest, Pam Marcheski. Pam is the principal owner of Intentions to Actions Leadership. It's a company that specializes in mindfulness-based leadership development. She has over 25 years of experience as a senior executive in a variety of Fortune 500 companies, and she sits on a few different boards for nonprofit organizations. Jenny's Flowers, which offers wraparound services for students who are aging out of the foster system. The Center for Community Solutions, which offers wraparound services for women in crisis. And then the Lamp of Learning, which provides scholarships for first-generation college students. So I am so excited to have you on our podcast today, Pam, because you are going to talk to us about how can we bring the right energy to our work. Yes, welcome. How are you today?
I am great, Dr. Walker. Thank you so much for having me. I'm thrilled to be with you today.
Thank you. I'm really glad that you're here as well, because I have been having conversations with people. And I think I mentioned this to you a little bit earlier before I hit record. But when I ask my clients these days lately, how are you? Let's check in. How's it going? I'm hearing things like, I'm overwhelmed. I got to tell you, I can't wait for Saturday. I need a rest. I need a vacation. I need this. I need that. And I can see it. I can see the pressure weighing them down. And I want to help them so much. So I was so excited when we heard about your message and everything that you've been sharing, because I think that what you've navigated in this space, the way you've navigated it, can help others who are trying to figure out, how can I be my best self at work without burning out in the process?
Yeah. It comes up a lot, right?
It does.
Yeah. I hear it a lot in the work that I do now. The buildup has been coming for quite some time. And I always say time has been time since the beginning of time. It's been
Yes.
24/7, 365. So time isn't our problem. It's our relationship maybe to time, right?
Ooh, let's
So
talk about it.
yeah, I just the 24/7 thing started long ago, all right? But we seem to be at a time or a period in our lives where things all seem to be crashing together. And
Mhm.
we're a world without boundaries anymore.
Yeah.
Um, I always say space is grace, and grace in space meaning in your own mind and in your own physical presence. But if you think about it, decades ago, 2 decades ago, we weren't living in this world of constant connectedness,
Mm.
this overwhelm. And so we had some natural boundaries. Children would go to school and they'd come home and they might have had something happen at school, but they would come home on a bus or walk home. And so there was space in between that. People would go to work and they would come home and maybe they'd tell a spouse or a roommate or a friend or their children about a bad thing, but they were home. They weren't carrying around something that could constantly remind them of it. And that world's over. There's no natural boundaries, and genie's not going back in the bottle. It's just
That's
not
true.
happening. So once we know the rules of the road, those are the conditions. How do you work with the conditions? When it really does take a lot of courage and strength today to just decide what those boundaries need to be so that you can be present to the things that are really important. And you can start to see the things that maybe aren't so important, but maybe we just built a habit pattern around them based on everyone else doing it or it just being offered up because everything will be offered up today. Yeah.
Yes, yes. I've been looking at it. I just finished a book called Essentialism by Greg McCowan, because I've been working on this concept myself. And one thing that's interesting to me is oftentimes we're presented with all of these wonderful opportunities, right? Here's an opportunity to go to this meeting. Here's an opportunity to meet with this person. Here's an opportunity to work on this project. And if you're not careful, you'll spread yourself so thin that you're busy and you're working hard, very, very hard, but only making an inch progress in any one area. And at the end of the day, feeling like, okay, did I accomplish anything? What
Yeah.
just happened?
Yeah. Yeah. We're spending a lot of time, if you look at distress and talk about what causes burnout, distress is on two levels, right? You have the stuff that's really big projects, really hard. You need to, like, it's a lot of pressure. But we also
Mm.
have this thing of distress on the other end. And it's all the remedial stuff that we've all of a sudden have in our lives, this constant email, the constant little things, right? And the two of them together, they really do clash and they add up.
Yes.
And so it really does take a lot of intention to kind of set up some parameters and even see it, right? Presence is really awareness of where you're at, both in mind and body. So we can be present physically, but are we really present? And that's really important. If we start to pay attention to the things that are getting our attention and build a strategy around that, maybe that idea about time, that emotion around time kind of comes down a little bit.
So I don't know if you're able to pinpoint a moment in time when this became so real for you. A
Mm,
moment in time when you realized, oh, if I don't do something different, I'm going to burn myself out. I have to now be courageous and I have to be more present. And maybe I've been going about this relationship with time all wrong. I need to break up with the way I used to connect with time. I need a better, more healthy relationship. When did that happen for you? What were the circumstances?
Yeah, I don't know if it was so much about burnout because that wasn't it for me. I wanted to show up better. And I started practicing mindfulness back in my old world in retail in my last role, when I was a vice president. And I noticed that when I was showing up for whether it's a store walk or a meeting, I felt like I was a little more reactionary than I wanted to be. I wasn't as engaged. And I said, I knew I had a pretty good toolbox, leadership toolbox, but it didn't feel like the toolbox was opening very well as best as I
Mm,
could. And I fell upon the book 10% Happier by Dan Harris. And it's a great book around mindfulness and how he found mindfulness and really introducing how to get present just by moments in the day tapping in, really getting present to what's physically showing up and focusing on the breath and setting intention of what do you want to be? How do you want to show up?
Yeah.
So it wasn't so much a time clash, although there was a lot going on. It was more about my perception of how I wanted to be for others. And the practice just worked. It worked really well. It helped me feel like I could be more present and I could listen a little bit. So I felt like the toolbox was opening again at the level that I wanted
Mm-hmm.
to.
Yes, yes. And retail is definitely one of those environments that can pull us in lots of different directions. Can you
Yeah,
help us understand the environments that you've worked at? So you mentioned Fortune 500 companies. Can you
mhm.
name drop for us, Pam? What
Sure.
what companies?
Sure. I spent 12 years at Sears. I kind of grew up there. I was very fortunate. My first role was at a department store in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. I was given lots of great opportunities to move and do many different things. Me and my son were packing through the US, getting moved from state to state, and I loved it. And then once we got to Sacramento, my son was going to be going into high school, and I was recruited by JCPenney's, and I spent 13 years at JCPenney's.
Wow.
And yeah, so and really loved all of it. It was was there, went to Salt Lake, I went to Chicago and Seattle and lots of great opportunities. So to do different roles and get to meet lots of people.
Yes. So I can imagine Sears, J.C. Penney's, your role as an executive probably involved a lot of meetings, presentations,
Mhm.
solving challenges and things that have been escalated up to you. What did your schedule look like? Was it packed to the brim?
It was pretty packed. I mean, because in each week I traveled almost every week. So I would leave on like a Tuesday morning or Monday night and come home on Thursdays or Fridays. In my last role, I had 168 stores in 8 districts. So I
Wow.
was always in a different place.
Yeah.
So I think from a schedule standpoint, it was really knowing what time zone you're in. That was
Yes.
important, right?
And getting your computer to know as well.
Right? Your computer to know what hotel you're checking in. And yeah, and then being there for the team. And that included store to store, visiting store to store, having dinner, having breakfast, all of those. So they're full days for sure.
Mm.
Sure.
Yes. So after you read 10% Happier and you said, I've got to think about how I show up and I need to make sure that I'm preparing for that, mentally preparing for this. How did you start to fit that into your life? Can you help us see what does this look like in the life of a busy executive? When do you even have time? And what does it look like? Did you ask yourself certain questions? Did you actually leave? Like what did you do to figure out
Yeah.
how you would show up?
Yeah. Today in my company, I teach a course MPEAK, Mindful Performance Enhancement Awareness and Knowledge. It's a long one,
Nice.
MPEAK. And I do it with executives and I do it with people that have really demanding jobs, schedules that are packed. And really do it in the corporate setting because I want them to see that even in that setting, we can incorporate moments in the day.
Mm.
We don't have to make it so complicated, but we have to remember to do it. Mindfulness is intangible, and humans do what's in front of them, so they do the tangible. So you have to just incorporate some ground rules about before you go to a meeting. How can you take one full minute to breathe and just setting up that habit pattern of doing that? Today, in many schedules, right, there's 5 meetings at one time. It's just taking a good look at that and saying that's just not possible, right? So walking, doing a walking in between meetings, just doing a slow walk so that you can be intentional. Tapping into the body. I can sit here with you and and while you're speaking, there's no reason why I can't be intentionally breathing so
Mm.
that my prefrontal cortex and my parasympathetic nervous system can be settled so that I can be present.
Hmm.
So I really want people to know that this is not something where you have to go away and do anything. You just have to bring some intentionality into your day. And that is easy said, hard do. I get it when you're running from meeting to meeting and all of that. But if you can just stop, drop, and roll and take a few breaths, it's unbelievable how much more discerning you'll be, how much more present you will be, and how much time you actually pick up. We spend so much time thinking about time and talking about time and chattering about time. And if we just slow it down and really see
Yes.
what's happening, you become much more empowered.
Mm, that is so good. And before we get into this scenario, which I think is perfect for the work that you're doing to bring mindful awareness to peak performance, a lot of the people I work with have the scenario where they have the calendar that is triple booked and there isn't time for lunch, there isn't time to go to the restroom, and they're late to every single meeting by 5 minutes because they're trying to make everything happen and be all things to all people. And what's interesting is sometimes that group is the hardest to help because they fight for those circumstances. Like, I have to be there, but I have to be there, but I have to. And it's clear to me that you may not need to actually be at every single one of those meetings, or there may be some adjustments that can be made because you're basically planning for perfection at all times, every single day. And we know that that's not going to happen. We can't rely on perfection every single day. So how would you help someone who has the calendar that is completely packed? What do you
Yeah.
tell them to get them to say, oh, you're right.
Well, you're not going to get comfortable until you're willing to get uncomfortable. And that's just the reality. And in the world today of 5 meetings at one time in the packed and the packed and the packed, you have to decide what's important here. How much you want to pack in,
Right.
or how effective do you want to be? And I think it's easy said, hard do, because and that has to be recognized. So we're not saying this is super easy. What we're saying is it's super important. Things that matter take effort. So how to play with it with some curiosity. What if you just didn't do 3 things this week that were on there? Just play with it. What are the lowest risk things out there? And how do we dip a toe in the water? We don't have to go all in and just start saying no to everything.
Right.
You
Because that's
know,
what
we don't
they
have
hear. They're like, what? You
yeah.
want me to just
Wait a minute,
cancel
say no to
everything?
everything. Yeah. 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 What I try to remind people too, when people are putting things on calendars, it's just because it's easy to do. It's very easy to put out a
Mhm.
meeting and put 400 people on the meeting.
Yes, it is.
And oftentimes they're like, well, but they don't see that I'm booked. I'm like, no, they don't even look. And it's not because they don't like you. It's not because they're thinking about you at all. So when you start to recognize that nobody's out to get each other, it's just that's important to them. But
Mm-hmm.
you have to be a little bit more strategic about what is it that's really, what are you really showing up for? And are you going to show up? You just can't be present for all things. So how do you prioritize? You know, if you could take a calendar and say, what's an absolute green? These are the absolute greens. Then are there some that are yellows? And what are the reds? Like, no, I'd like to be there because I feel like I should be there. Then tap into like what that's more your ego. How do we set
Mm-hmm.
that aside? Or be honest with whoever set up the meeting. I can't be there.
Yeah, yeah. And
It is
maybe even look to your
hard.
team to say who could potentially fill in for me
Absolutely.
during this meeting.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Everybody doesn't have to be there.
Yeah.
You can read thousands of articles and comments about people about the wasted time in meetings, but it's like time in meetings are badges of honors, and it's
Yes.
not working. So
Mm-hmm.
you have to kind of get off that insanity bus, but be playful with it, right? Just some curiosity. We don't have to go all in. And you said it very well. How much better would it be for your team if you could empower them to be able to handle it? And that is one thing really in the last 10 years, maybe 20 years,
Mm.
it's gotten really bad, is this idea of having to be copied on everything, the group messaging, the group chat. We're not empowering people.
No, that's just another email that I have to comb through to see
Yeah.
do I need to respond to this?
Yes.
And if
Yes.
you're the low person on the totem pole on that email, that may raise your blood pressure because now a VP is on the email or a director is on the
All the
email.
time.
And now I have to respond with a perfectly crafted message so I don't get in trouble, or I want to make sure that they know that I'm still doing my job the way it should be done. Yeah,
Yeah.
those emails can create a lot of anxiety.
It's really, it's unfortunate because so many new leaders today aren't being allowed to make mistakes. They're not being allowed to make decisions, and they're second guessing themselves all the time. And if you have a leadership organization walking on eggshells because they're worried that you're on a CC line or there's going to be a reaction to it, that there's not a stable base. That's not good. And it's gotten really, really challenging today. I couldn't imagine. I told somebody this, my first store. I remember my district manager basically showing up in the parking lot. He says, I'm going to walk in there and I'm going to leave. And you're not that big of a store and you're going to make some mistakes, but you're not going to break the company.
Oh,
And
what a gift.
what a gift, right?
Yes.
And I did make mistakes and I didn't break the company. And I got to learn and I got to grow. And I know I didn't walk in there every day wondering if, I was going to be followed up on, or if I had to report back, if I was going to get 6 texts on how I'm handling things. It was so different. And it just isn't that way today.
Yeah. Yeah. I almost feel like we should have decision rules. And I know that there are decision rules around email. So
nobody follows them.
Yes. It's so true. Okay, so I think that's a great segue into this scenario that I have for you, and I'd love to pick your brain about it, Pam, just to see, let's add some additional eyes on this and see if we can help this manager. Okay, manager's name is Pat. Pat is always burning the midnight oil, tends to say things like, I can handle it, no need to worry about me, I'll take care of this myself, it's faster that way. Pat is notorious for taking on too much work and often cancels personal plans to meet deadlines at work. And while he may pride himself on his dedication, his relentless work habits are taking a toll on his health, his work-life balance, and his team's morale because they feel pressured to keep up with Pat. All right. Pam, have you met anyone like Pat?
Pat.
Yes.
Pat. Oh my goodness.
Oh, poor Pat. I've seen Pat everywhere. Yes.
Pat all the time. Yeah. That's a lot. Yeah.
That's a lot.
Well, first, bravo to Pat for wanting to show up and really perform at a high level. Right. So, we have to not make Pat feel bad about the fact that that's, he really is. He's trying to show up his best self at work.
Trying to hold everything together like Atlas. I've got the world on my back. Yes.
Bravo. And I think that right there, just starting to acknowledge when you're trying to be your best self. And then really say, let's just have some curiosity. Of all the things that you're doing, what's most important?
Yeah.
What's most important in your role? And what are the most important things that you do? And if part of it is leading other people, what impact are you having? And just kind of holding that with a little curiosity. When you think about the time, all that time that you're spending doing it all, if you saw one of your people doing that, how would they feel? How would that feel? I'd never ask.
Of course, Pat would probably be like, no, they should. This is what I see with this particular character. No, they shouldn't be doing all of that. That's too much work. I don't want to pressure them. They tend to be really protective of their teams.
Absolutely. That's where Pat has to recognize that, your actual presence of doing all of these things is why they want to do those things. It's you. It's not, you're putting the responsibility on them, but the responsibility is on you. And the responsibility is on you is to show up in a way that creates that environment. Because the leader's job is to create the environment in which people can perform at their highest level.
Yes, well said.
Or the environment. If you are the actual environment, then you have to make the changes. And we see this all the time. I see so many great leaders who make it intentional not to send emails on a Sunday or late at night. Why? Because they're aware that it's not enough just to say you don't have to read them. That's unfair. The minute
your phone is still going to go bling, 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 and you're still conditioned to check that. Yes.
So, from a leadership standpoint for Pat, it's just really recognizing that the conditions you create determine how well your people are how your team can perform. And if you're the conditions, then you need to take a hard look at that. Second, nobody can be 24/7 being strategic and being a good performer and a good decision maker without a little space to breathe. And so he's holding it so tightly that he's probably not even performing at optimal performance.
Yes. Yes.
If I go to the gym for 24/7, which I couldn't. Let's just start there.
Let's just start there.
Let's start
Longer than an
there.
hour.
Yeah, right? Well, maybe just go. But anyway, but if we're doing push-ups and doing push-ups, right? Your arms get tired. And this idea that you can continuously do it, you know, it doesn't work that way, right? Muscles,
Yeah.
we grow muscles when we exert some stress there, right? We get exerted and we allow it to also have adequate rest. And then we come back at it, and then there's rest. So if you want to build a muscle around performance, then there has to be some space for some rest.
Ooh, that is so good. That's wisdom right there, Pam. Thank you. When we're talking about building up this muscle and allowing space in between sprints for a little bit of rest, a little bit of restoration, that is where Levity comes in. So my question to you is, what have you done, or what do you recommend that people do to bring some fun back into their lives in between all of these sprints?
Yeah, I love this question because sometimes I'll get all up in my head or I'll be working hard on something and I have a very packed call to call too. I play loud music. If I'm all, I will, yeah, well, I won't say your
You're
name.
like bumping loud music. Like
Yeah,
Eminem or something. I'm just imagining you right now with the most inappropriate loud music ever.
Well, I will tell a little Alexa machine over here to play happy music, or Beyonce's new album is just I over and over again, but I will do that. I will pump the music up really loud. Sometimes I'll even dance because, well, it's just me and the cat and nobody's,
Yeah.
so that's fine. I write my windows a lot because I have lots of them. And so if I'll just like popcorn on the windows and write
Nice.
ideas. I took
Did you?
so
How
fun.
was that?
So fun. Yeah, so fun. Yeah, I loved it. Loved it. We use a little bit of word improv in MPeak as part of a mindfulness lesson. So I wanted to enhance that a little bit, but I also thought it would be really fun because I'm not maybe good at the silly. So I
Yes.
wanted to do some of that and play with it. You learn so much about yourself in improv.
Yes, you do. And what
Oh
you're
my
afraid of.
Yes. Yes. Like, yes. Remember how to
Now,
make I had to be a vegetable or
so what I've noticed is whenever I stretch myself in a new area, I'm able to take that back, those lessons learned back. What have you taken back from improv into your work?
I think the number one thing I took back and I thought I was pretty self-aware of what are the things that I'm uncomfortable with, but I'm much more acutely aware to those things. And then how do I laugh at it a little bit more, right? How do I make this playful? So if I feel a friction point on something, just to be a little bit more playful with it, that's been good. And less seriousness around even my social time, right? Do I have time to do this, right?
Yeah.
And bit more laughter around, really? Like this should be a fun thing. So just more levity
Exactly.
around that for sure. Yeah.
Very cool. Very cool. So, you have shared so many jewels with us today around what we need to kind of take a step back and remember who you are and who you want to be, how you want to show up. How can you be present in the moment so that you can bring the right energy to your conversations and all of the interactions that you have at work? What is on the horizon for you?
Well, in a few days, seeing my son is on the horizon, which I'm really excited
Very
about.
exciting.
Very
Yes.
excited about. Yeah, right now I am really committed to teaching MPeak. I think it's such a powerful course. This course, there are a lot of development courses out there and very good ones. What I love so much about MPeak, and it was designed by UCSD with the neuroscience and the mindfulness department, is it really works with the conditions of our world today. It doesn't take away the importance of leadership and communication and strategy. But what it does do is it works with how do we get ourselves our internal leadership so that we can show up our best selves in the external leadership.
Yeah.
And all of the competencies in this course tie directly back to a competency in a traditional leadership setting. You cannot be strategic if you don't have balance. You cannot be strategic if you don't have openness. What does that mean? How do you be curious? How do you be more open? Right? So everything in it allows us to get at the internal piece so that we can do the external stuff. And I think it's a gold mine in our conditions of our world today. And so I love that. I love what it offers.
Very nice. And if anyone is interested in learning more about MPeak and how they can get into it, where should they go?
They can go to my website. There's a whole tab on intentact.com, intentact.com. So the company is Intentions to Actions Leadership. What we talk about in Intentions to Actions is what is your intentions? Here's your actions. How do we close the gap so that they come close? And so it's intentact.com. They can also find me on LinkedIn and they can message me there. And they can message me at pam@intentact.com.
That's beautiful. I love that. What are your intentions? What are you actually doing? And how can we close the gap between those two? It's beautiful. Yeah. Pam, thank you for joining us today. I hope that you have a wonderful, wonderful weekend and enjoy all of that time with your son.
Thank you. I can't wait. Thank you, Doctor. Thanks for having me. It was really fun to be with you.
Thanks for tuning in to the Lead with Levity podcast. To get resources mentioned in this episode and find out what we're all about, check us out at leadwithlevity.com.